All right. Well, it is an honor to welcome you today, this afternoon. My name is Janine Mason. I am the Executive Director and founder of the Fieldstone Leadership Network in San Diego. And this is our first offering of FORTIFY. And FORTIFY is a partnership between Fieldstone and the Nonprofit Institute at the University of San Diego. And as both of our organizations aim to support nonprofit leadership throughout the county and throughout the nonprofit sector, unfortunately, COVID-19 gave us an opportunity that was meaningful for us to come together and to work together to support nonprofit organizations and professionals. So this is the first offering in FORTIFY. FORTIFY is a webinar series. We'll be offering 2 webinars each week, one that has to do with organizational development and the other with personal and professional leadership. So on Friday, we will be talking about coaching. So if you'd like to join us on Friday at 12 noon, we still have a few spaces available, so feel free to register for that. But today we are going to be talking about fundraising during an epic crisis. And I will say, in all my years of doing this, I don't think that I've ever used the word epic crisis. So that speaks to where we are today and the requirements of leadership to navigate in uncharted waters. So we are excited to be able to bring this learning opportunity to you today. To help you to navigate our time together and to make the most of your experience, I want to share some helpful hints with you. If you're having any technical difficulties, please feel free to contact Cynthia Fernandez. You'll see her email address on your screen, or you can contact Cynthia using the chat feature in Zoom. For your information, everyone is muted. So if you have kids or dogs or neighbors, animals making noise in the background, you don't have to worry about that. Please put any questions that you have for the community or for Sally, our facilitator and presenter today, in the Q&A box. And if you have other resources that you would like to share with the community, please also add those into chat. We are going to only be together today for about an hour, but I want to let you know that we're going to have after hours. And so if you have a question and it hasn't been answered, when we reach our time limit, we will stay on the call a little bit later for about 10 minutes so that we make sure that we can get everybody's questions answered. We are recording this webinar, and any resources that we accumulate as a community during our time together will be added to our website along with that recording. So if you want to come back to it, you'll be able to find it on both of the Fieldstone and the Nonprofit Institute's websites. And if you're new to either one of our programs and you would like some more information, we would both be very happy to welcome you into our networks and to our community, and you will find more information on our offerings on our website as well. As I mentioned, we're going to stay on for about 10 or 15 minutes afterwards to make sure that we can get all the questions answered that you have for Sally. And now it's my privilege to introduce Fieldstone's partners in this effort, the Nonprofit Institute, and today we're joined by Dr. Laura Dietrich, who serves as the Associate Director of the Nonprofit Institute. She's also a Professor of Practice at the School of Leadership and Education Sciences. I'm very blessed to call her a personal friend and a professional colleague, and I'm excited about this opportunity for us to continue to do some work together. And Laura is joined on the call by Lynn Corbett, who is the Director of the Governance and Community Programs of the Nonprofit Institute, and he's currently a doctoral candidate at USD as well. And I've been lucky enough to work with Lynn too in a professional capacity, and I call him a friend too, but he's very skilled at what he does. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to share some additional information with you and to introduce our speaker for today.
Terrific, thank you. Janine, somebody else needs to mute. So welcome everybody. I looked at the list of participants and many I know, and I really thank you for always engaging with us. And for those of you that I don't know, I look forward to getting to know your organizations better as we move forward. As Janine said, this is a partnership that's grown out of not what we think is our best idea, but rather what nonprofit leaders have told us that they want to have help with, that they need help with. So for those of you that have not noticed, we have surveyed heavily the nonprofit sector in the last, we released one of the first studies in the country on the effects of the pandemic in March, and we followed up with a subsequent survey, and the results of all of that research will be coming out, and as you are now on our listservs, you'll get to see them, and we've been conveying the results of those. We spent the last week, and it'll be into next week, briefing government officials and foundations on what nonprofit leaders are saying. But for our purposes today, I wanted just to show you one of the findings. And the findings are, you're telling us when we ask you, what do you want the Nonprofit Institute and its partners like Fieldstone to be doing? 3/4 of you want help with reevaluating fundraising strategies, financial scenario planning. You can see that in there. A lot of results around health and support for health and wellness. So we've taken these data, and ultimately number 2, which was collect data and share it. So we've been doing that. So I apologize if you're feeling a little survey fatigue, but it's not. The input you give is critical. So we do use it. And we do share it broadly, and we've used it to inform this webinar series. So since the ultimate ask was for reevaluating fundraising strategies, you'll see that's what we're starting with. We're starting today, but you'll see in the whole offering of FORTIFY sort of 2 buckets of approaches, right? One on real technical aptitude, organizational capacity, and then your personal well-being and mental health and anxiety, management and those kinds of things. We've got a bunch of offerings in there to support your soul, right? As you stretch and bend in ways that are probably unimaginable to most people who don't see what you do every day. So I hope you feel that this meets your needs. You are welcome to any of the services in our offering. And I encourage you to share this work with other nonprofit leaders, and you can sign in for as many or as few as you like. But today I'll get you to the good stuff, which is our speaker for today, a woman we've been acquainted with at the Institute for a while now, and we love her work. And I noticed that she was doing this work around how to fundraise during a pandemic. So we went straight to Sally Bixby, who is, Janine, can you advance the slide, who is going to present to you today. But I mean, you can read her bona fides. She has a wonderful consulting firm, but I think the thing that really endears us closely to Sally is that she's a San Diegan. She's in Portland right now, but she's also works in San Diego. And the more we can integrate her into our work, the happier and she'll be and will be as San Diegans will benefit from her knowledge. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Sally.
Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my slides. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. And it's an honor to be here. With respect to your time, I'm going to move kind of quickly through all of this. There's a lot to cover. First of all, I just want to say that you all are so lucky to be in a community that has the Nonprofit Institute in it, and that reacted so quickly and wanted to find out what you need, and is providing training and support around that. So it's really an honor for me to be one of the first people to present, or the first person. So over the next hour or so, I am going to talk about what it means to conduct a successful campaign right now. I mean, wow. We usually are doing this at the end of the year, aren't we? But no, people are launching campaigns now, and I'm watching them raise lots of money, and I'm going to talk about that and how to make that work for you. What it means to be shifting your event to a virtual event, and what I'm seeing that is successful, and how to help you start thinking now about what it means to emerge stronger at the end of this, and what your vision is for the future of your organization, because there will be an end, and we need to start planning for what we're going to look like when we get to that point. So I want to start with how important it is right now to be in communication. I have given this presentation several times Our stay-at-home order started about the same time that it did in California. As a matter of fact, I was supposed to come to California, and after reading about what leads to the transmission of the virus and travel being one of them, I decided not to come because there were more cases up here than there was in San Diego in mid-March, and that has changed. But what I have found is that it's really important to be in communication with your constituents, so that's your donors, your volunteers, and whatnot. So, and what do you communicate? What are those changes in your workplace? Honest update on the status of your employees. So if you are getting the payroll protection money, I think it's important that you communicate that, what your staffing looks like, and how the virus is affecting your mission. I am watching some really exciting program pivots that people are making and how they are adapting with their staff to continue to meet the needs of their constituents, of the people that participate in their programs, and at the same time do it in a way that is safe. So if you haven't already updated your website to show what your COVID response is, it's important that you do that. If you haven't sent out an email to all of your constituents talking about that, or maybe you did that a few weeks ago and now some new things have changed because geez, things are changing all the time, aren't they? So it's important that you keep in touch with folks, do it in a way that is meaningful and honest, and keep them connected to your mission. And I'm going to talk about that more as we go, because I'm seeing that communication is what constituents want. So let's talk a little bit about what the expectation is for this crisis. Now, I'm going to be really clear with you. I am not an epidemiologist. I am not an economist. I am doing a lot of reading in what I think are reputable sites, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and so on, reading, science pieces about what to expect. There's a lot of comparisons to the Spanish flu. We really don't know for sure, but this is what I'm hearing other colleagues are talking about, and this is some of the trends I'm witnessing right now. So right now, we're seeing a lot of giving, and I just cannot underestimate, or I want to emphasize how important that is. People are giving right now. Of course, the conversations always need to be sensitive with your donors. It's if you are able to give at this time and so on. But think about how many people are still working, how much money people are saving because they're not spending it on trips, entertainment, on gas. They're not eating out as much. People are starting to get their stimulus checks. I've had several organizations tell me that people are donating their stimulus checks to them. And I'm seeing big giving for the month of April, that is for sure. What we know happens after there is some kind of crisis like what we're in right now is that there will be a low. And I'm predicting that's going to happen later in the summer, especially as the weather gets nicer and restrictions get eased and other issues start coming up in the press. This is going to be with us for a while. However, people are going to get tired of it. And, thank goodness they're probably going to start putting their phones down and not looking at the news every 5 minutes like we were, especially a month ago or so. That what will follow is a recovery period, and that is going to be led most likely by your loyal donors and your foundations. So it is so important that you keep communicating, stay in touch with your donors all the way through this period so that they understand your work, they understand the impact of it, and that they're ready to help you when it's time to start moving into the final phase, which is the your emerging stronger phase. It's what things are going to look like when we finally get out of this. The economy is starting to tick up and whatnot. So this is what I'm hearing people talk about and what I've seen. I have been raising money for 30 years, having lived through 9/11. the Great Recession and now this period, I think that this is what we're going to see. So let's talk about launching a campaign, and in particular a crisis campaign. So I don't know how many of you have already been in campaign or are thinking about one, but if you haven't, or you weren't a part of Giving Tuesday or whatnot, it's still not too late. I want you to think about, first of all, what you are going to raise the money for. Donors like specific asks. So I'm going to give you an example. I worked with the Humane Society here in Washington State, and they know during a downturn of the economy that they see more pet surrenders, there's more need for veterinary care, there's more need for pet food and whatnot. So we pretty quickly went into campaign and communicated those needs to their donors and constituents. We had a name for the campaign, Pets and People, and we set an amount of $25,000. Then the executive director and the board chair and the development manager went to a few key leadership donors and asked them if they would be willing to help kick off the campaign with gifts. But they started by being really sensitive and asking questions about them. How are you is a really important question to ask right now. And it's more important than ever to be listening carefully to what your donors have to say. You need to listen for, we've been laid off, somebody is sick and whatnot. There could be good news too. So listen for that and be sensitive. And then after you launch your campaign, don't be afraid. Go ahead, stay in touch. Don't be shy for asking for support throughout the campaign. I've seen 6 weeks work really well for this type of campaign. And we've been sending out what I call a cultivation email, where it's you're talking of something specific about your program. And then later in the week, an ask email where you're referring to that cultivation email you sent out earlier in the week. It's also important that you look at doing a direct mail piece too. The clients I worked with have been selective. This is event season, so they're being careful about who they're sending a hard copy letter to, but those have gone very well, and we've seen really great responses. It's important that you utilize multi-channels of communication now. Get press out about the great work you're doing. Do not be shy about that. We're looking for good stories, and telling your pivot story is really important. Work your social media. That is an area where it's going to be hard to tire people out. We know social media is like a river of information. So it's not like you're going to be sending 3 emails to somebody in one day. You can get more content up. So a hashtag that we have been using as a part of this is Stimulate Hope. So here's an example of a social media post. If you know of somebody in your organization who's willing to share their stimulus check, maybe do a profile story about them, and they can talk about why they're able to do that now and why they've chosen your organization. And then celebrate and thank. Show progress. I love the Give Lively giving platform. It's free except for low cost credit card fees. And there's a thermometer on there. You can create a campaign page, and I'm going to show you one in a minute. Get your board involved in sending thank you notes and making calls. Provide a script for them on how to do that. And then do something exceptional. I participated in a virtual event for an organization. They sent me, within a couple days of my small donation, they sent me a handwritten postcard. And I thought that was really effective. So before I move on, are there any questions about launching a campaign right now? Okay. I want to share with you an example of one that one of my clients, Neighborhood House, did here in Portland. And I am going to switch my screen for a moment here. So bear with me while I do that. A little technical piece here. I'm not seeing where I can share my screen on this. Okay, well, I'm going to go back to just staying here. So I worked with, okay, hang on, I'm getting a little technical advice. Okay, here we go. Stop share. It just wasn't popping up. So thank you for bearing with me while I do this.
And while you're doing that, Sally, I'll remind everyone, you can ask any questions you want in the Q&A and we'll monitor them, whether she gets to them right then or follow up afterwards.
Thank you for the color commentary while I get this up. Thank you. Okay, so this is Neighborhood House. Our campaign that we came up with is Neighbor to Neighbor, the COVID-19 Response Fund. This is the front. This is the homepage for their website. So you see right away when you come to the website what their campaign is about. You can make a donation very easily. It goes straight to the page. And then you can see the different amounts that you can make. You can see that they had set a goal of $100,000 and we actually ended up exceeding the goal. It's actually more than what is even on here on the page. So you can involve peer-to-peer fundraising by going to, I want to fundraise for this. This is a way to get your board members involved and whatnot. This was really effective. And we did the multi-way of asking. I've got to be honest with you, gifts started coming in before we even started asking. And that is because this is what people do during times of crisis. They start giving to all different kinds of organizations. This is a social service organization. However, I have a client that works with training people for the construction trades. They were told before the pandemic by one of their donors that he was going to give them $10,000. And then after the pandemic, he raised his gift on his own to $100,000. So I'm seeing wonderful things happening in that way. So I want to show you some other ways that you can stay in touch with your constituency that I think has been really creative and interesting. And one of them is using an example of an organization that I referred to earlier, and that is the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society. So their Facebook page, what they did as they were doing their campaign is they sent out fun emails on Fridays on pet tips. So the person that runs their shelter did one week how to trim your cat nails, another one how to give medications to your dog. This one right here is about how to make cat treats. And they had someone who did a really good job on doing some editing for them, which, I'm finding that millennials and maybe a teenager in your house are really good at doing. So don't be shy and utilizing some people that might be living in your own home to help with this. We've had really, really great response. So while we were in campaign, we were also sending out uplifting, fun, informative messaging, and there's different ways that you can do that depending on the mission of your organization. So another one I want to share with you is an organization that is in San Diego, and it's the women's, okay, it looks like someone has asked a question, so I don't want to lose them, is the Women's Museum of California. They have been putting out some really interesting and great ways to engage with people in the community, talking about things that have happened in women's history and whatnot. I think they've done an excellent job. So I want to encourage you to look at their website, sign up for their emails so you can have some great examples. They had a First Friday event that went virtual. I think they've been really creative and done a good job of engaging. So were there any questions? I saw it look like there might be.
Sally, we do have one question.
Great.
It's about virtual fundraisers, and I know you have part of your presentation on virtual fundraisers. Would you like me to ask you that question now or wait until we get to that part?
We are coming right up to it. So, but go ahead and ask. So then let's go ahead and ask right after this next slide.
Okay.
And then we're going to transition to virtual fundraisers, and then that is the perfect time. So thank you. So one of the things that I want to emphasize is how important it is right now for you to engage your board, willing staff. So maybe there are people who don't have as much to do. So maybe they can help more with social media posts, doing some creative videos that are going to tell more about your mission, and your volunteers. I know I'm on a board for a family homeless shelter, and we can't have volunteers in the shelter right now. So there's other things that our volunteers are doing. So it's an important time to get creative. Okay, so events planned for this spring or summer. Let's go ahead, and what question do you have?
So the question is, can you talk more about virtual fundraisers that have proven to be successful? We are trying to build community as well as raise funds in our school district.
Yeah, that's a great question. That is one of the hardest parts, I think, about the virtual fundraisers, is that we miss out on that community aspect. A colleague of mine who does fundraising events all over the country, she had quoted a poll to me, a couple years ago that, 82% of donors like events, and it's because we like community, we like being together. And of course, right now, that is really difficult to do. I'm hoping that later some restrictions are going to be eased and we can come up with some ideas about if it's, you're allowed to have gatherings of 10 or less, that people who are close to each other, like maybe someone who would put a table together would host something in their home and you could view it together. Right now, one of the ways that I think that I've seen effective community built is by being proactive about the chat that is present and an option with your YouTube live option and your Facebook live. That's a way to engage people. I've seen some people using the Zoom function so that people have time to meet in small groups. They can have questions or whatnot. But other than that, it's a little bit more challenging. So those are some of the things that I've seen right now. So yes, there is a lot of pivoting that is going on right now to virtual events. I think there is a different way, yet similar way, in looking at setting up a successful virtual event. One of the things that I have seen, the events that are successful, they have about 90% of their goal going in. It's a little bit, you can have more wiggle room, I found, with the group in-person events, whereas with the virtual events, there just isn't that camaraderie and, sort of playful peer pressure that happens when people are all giving in a room together. So I worked with Fair Housing Council of Oregon, for example. Their event was April 23rd. We had actually 100% of the goal raised before we went into it. They had started early on it. And then we raised more money after that. And it was all a bonus. How we did that was through peer-to-peer fundraising with board members, with staff. What we found is that more people further away were able to get involved. There isn't as much of an issue of, you know, I can't make it, I'm in another town, because of course they can dial in virtually. The way we did this event, which was effective for them, I have not seen one right way to do this, is that we did a series of videos leading up to a Facebook Live event, which we actually pre-recorded. Their comfort level was not doing something live, and it's also more expensive, and there's some more technical things involved if you do a live event. Episcopal Community Services of California had their event on Saturday night, which I watched. They did it live. They hired a company to help them do it. They had their auctioneer there. They had a live band. They had a good portion of their money raised, and basically the auctioneer stood there with a live, you know, thermometer, and it showed who was giving and how much, and unless they wanted to be anonymous. Behind him, he was working with a teleprompter, and he pretty much stayed until he reached the goal. Upaya in Seattle, they were probably one of the first in the country, because of course the outbreak, the biggest outbreak, started in Seattle. They had about 4 days to change their event from an in-person event to a virtual event, and they did an auction gala type event. And they did it all through video. If you go to their website, I believe they still have on there the resources on how they did it. They did a webinar, and they did it on their own phones. They sent out the videos and whatnot. They had a giving page where people could bid on auction items and whatnot. Earlier on, we did not know how long this would last. What we do know now is that this is probably going to last a while. So if you have travel packages, that is going to, I'm not seeing those go for as much money, because people don't know when they're going to be able to use them. So even if it says you can use this at any time, it's not as compelling to people. Any kind of experience that, you know, involves a restaurant or, you know, like a paintball or anything like that, it's just not as compelling for people to buy right now. So I'm seeing people shrink their auctions, their silent auction, their live auctions down to make it more relevant as much as possible. But the money is really in your special appeal. So work with that. I suggest that you have matches, and maybe even you start asking in advance for money, and even after the so-called event, and have, you know, a 24-hour match. That's one of the things we did in some of the campaigns I talked about earlier. Where it was like, for the next 24 hours, we have a $5,000 match and your gift will be matched. You can do something like that leading up to your event. Think of it more as a campaign than an actual day of type event. Solid Ground in Seattle, their event was also live streamed, and they had a chef that prepared food. And he had worked in their organization, worked with the kids in their organization. So it was very mission relevant. And it was, you know, it was interesting and engaging. They did not hit their goal. I don't know as much about them, but they certainly were creative about it. And it was an engaging event. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing, that you have a few options. There's the pre-recorded, you send out emails and the videos that I've seen, there are people who are talking about your mission. It's someone within your programs. It's maybe someone who has been a part of your program. They're recording these at home and uploading them to a Google Drive. Someone's doing some very basic editing, and then they're getting dropped into an email. People are using Facebook Live and YouTube to do live events, which can be live streamed, or they can be pre-recorded and added. There's all kinds of software out there how to do that. And I would just tap into your networks and look for folks that you think that can help you. You can do a combination of pre-recorded and live stream. I haven't seen that there is one best way to do it. It really has to do more with how much time you spend raising money on the front end. Are there any questions about virtual events before I shift gears?
We don't have any questions in the Q&A, but let's give everyone just a moment in case they have something that's on their mind that they wanted to add.
Yeah, so I don't think high tech is actually more beneficial than low tech. Upaya, they did it all themselves, and they raised more money than they ever have. And what I've heard is their staff and board really worked on it. So it's just like any other kind of fundraising. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. So let's shift gears and talk about creating a development plan that incorporates your new normal, your new reality, because it is time to start thinking about what are we going to do now in the next year, maybe even 2 years. Think about your budget goals for right now. And this is one of the reasons why I want you to consider doing a campaign, asking for support now. And my clients have been using the money that they have raised now to help offset some of the shortfalls that they think are going to happen later in the year. So take advantage of this wave of generosity. And I don't mean take advantage in, a dark sense. I mean, people give because it makes them feel good, and give them the opportunity to support your important work. So think about your budget and how you're going to modify your goals, and maybe you don't have to. In the last 6 weeks, I've had clients who've modified goals, and then they've ended up changing them. There's a lot of that needs to go on right now. Being flexible, being responsive, having a sense of humor is more important now than ever. So when you are looking at creating your goal, there's some basics of solid fundraising that I want you to keep in mind. This is what I always look at, and now is a great time to do some evaluation. So start by thinking about the 80-20 rule. And what I mean by the 80-20 rule of development is that you spend 80% of your time on cultivation and stewardship and 20% on the ask. So I want to do a big qualifier right here, and this is also an important piece that I think that you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about your own agency and yourself. And so I know I am a white woman that came from a privileged background. I have been classically trained in fundraising. So the emphasis I have always been taught is how important it is to build relationships with your donors, and how important it is to make them feel important and that they are an important part of your team. Not everybody has the time or the luxury to do that. If you can incorporate one new thing in your development plan, where maybe you are able to get 2 or 3 board members who are willing to make thank you calls to your donors, something like that. It's a win-win for everybody, because your board member will now be a part of the fundraising process and they didn't have to ask for money. And your donor, who will most likely not pick up, though I'm finding more people are picking up right now because they're at home and they have more free time and they're curious. Your donor is going to feel good hearing something personal from you, a personal thank you. Always provide a script for anybody, and the script is only an acknowledgement of the gift, and there is no mention of, I hope you will give again, or something like that. It's just, thank you so much for your recent gift. And of course, hi, how are you? I hope you and your family are doing well. And I just want to thank you so much for your recent donation to our organization and how you're going to help us through this time of transition. So think about cultivation, which is inspiring your donors to get closer to your mission, and stewardship, which is saying thank you and demonstrating the impact of their gift. If you have never created an impact report, now is a good time to be thinking about something like that. And it can be very simple. It's, what have you done in the last year or so, and how the donations that your donors have given last year, how they've been able to fund your work. So I talked about this. I always try to weave in finding ways to involve your board. One of the biggest complaints I hear from staff is our board is not very involved in fundraising. They don't want to fundraise. They were never asked to fundraise. And it doesn't seem like they're doing very much, period. Big complaints I hear from board is, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I need more input. I need more training and whatnot. One of the things that I think is so incredibly important that you think about when you are trying to involve your board in fundraising is that you meet people where they are. You meet them at their comfort level. I tell people, this is what I tell boards when I do trainings, it's really important that you as a board member stretch yourself. Like for those of us who have children or anybody we love in our lives, sometimes we do things that we don't really want to do, but we know it's going to be for the greater good for all involved. And then sometimes it turns out to be a lot better than we thought it was going to be. And that's one of the things I tell board members, is that being part of the cultivation and stewardship process is generally a lot more joyful than you think it is. So find ways to involve your boards in saying thank you, writing handwritten notes, making thank you calls, posting social media, sharing social media, and so on. And if they feel comfortable, asking them to make gifts or to ask their family to make gifts. So fundraising should be joyful for all involved. And that means for your board and also for your donors. And what I mean by joyful is that you ask board members how they want to be involved. It's not a telling and demanding kind of situation. It's having that personal one-on-one conversation. Now, I've been doing this a long time. I've been raising money for over 30 years. And when I started raising money, there were no computers. We didn't have email. We used the phone, we used hard copy, we met in person. So what I tell people is, do not underestimate the importance of a personal phone call. Now, I saw some flashing that there were some questions, or maybe some sharing of sources.
I think what you saw was the chat. We don't have any questions right at this moment, but we are coming up on our Q&A time. So if anybody does have questions, feel free to go ahead and put those in the Q&A portion of the webinar, and we'll get to those shortly.
So one of the things that I am suggesting with my clients is that we create a simple plan for the next year. You don't have to spend tons and tons of time going into great detail, all your metrics, whatnot, because we're in a time that we don't, this is uncharted waters for a lot of us. We don't know what the next year is going to be like. So I'm suggesting people create a plan A and a plan B and share it with your stakeholders. And so going back to the question that was made earlier about how to create more community, what I'm looking at is like plan A right now for events in the fall, for example, is that it may be that we are still going to do virtual events the way we are now. Now, plan B could be, how do we set it up if people are allowed to have small groups in their home? And what are some fun things that we can do? There's a catering company here in Portland that is providing catering for events where people are able to buy food, have it delivered to their home. So that might be a fun thing to do for you know, your quote unquote table if you're able to host it at your home. Another thing, if you have a planned in-person thank you event, be ready to go virtual on that. And I would, to make sure that there's more participation, another way to involve your board is to ask them to reach out to your donors and ask them if they would be able to come to either an in-person event, if it looks like it's to be in person, or if they could come to the virtual event, because love to meet them and hear more about them. And share it with your stakeholders. Boards are really nervous right now, and so it's share with them what your plans are and your citizens. I was at a board meeting last night with Neighborhood House, and it was just really fun to share with them the great successes we've been having so far. It makes them feel better about things. It gives them a sense of hope and well-being. I'm starting to wrap up. I want to emphasize how important it is more than ever to include in your plan. What I am seeing is that the organizations that are thoughtfully engaging with their constituents, their open rates are going way up. And it needs to be mission appropriate for your organization. So, for example, I work with an organization that is an ecological organization, and they have just started engaging with their constituents. For the they hadn't engaged with them very much. Now they're getting a lot more people opting out, but their open rates have doubled. And so the people that don't really care are going away, but because they're doing more engagement via social media, they're doing panel discussions, you know, every month, anywhere from 500 to 900 email addresses, the engagement activity they're doing. So the folks that are opting out aren't as much of a worry because they're getting more and more folks that are work and are doubling their open rates. So to start wrapping things up, I will share my with you. I'm going to send to USD, and I also have a process sheet that you get your ideas flowing on what you want to do next with your development activities, going back to some things I've talked about now. I'm also, they will share with you an example of a couple appeal letters that I've seen that have been really effective lately for a few organizations that I have seen. So now is the time for questions.
Does anybody have any questions that they would like Sally to answer?
We have two in the chat. Because
yeah.
One is, how much engagement is too much engagement?
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good question, Laura. And that I watch open rates, and I also pay attention to what board members are saying. This is a good way to get feedback from your donors, people who are receiving your emails and whatnot. But look at your Facebook page. Are you getting more likes, getting more shares? The beautiful thing about fundraising now is we can get these analytics because so much of it is online. So I would pay attention with that. Again, being mindful of the engagement piece, that is the cultivation and stewardship part versus the asking for money. So be mindful, if you're going to go into campaign right now in asking for support with a, you know, for the COVID response for your organization, be mindful of how close that is to your virtual event. You need time for people to breathe in between. And also, this is important for you to look at when you are sending out hard copy email or hard copy letters. Don't, you know, sending a letter and turning around asking them to the event too, unless it's maybe one of your board members or somebody you know you have permission to do that.
Sally, we have a question that's related to that, and it is, what is the best way to engage your customers via email? More copy, more images, more stories?
Yeah, what I have seen is mixing it up. So one might be more text heavy, then do one that has a video, and video should be short. I think like a minute and a half at the most. And then doing one that is that has photographs in it with links. So what I am seeing work is I want you to consider to do a survey from each constituent. What do they want? You know, ask questions about why they care about organization. What do they see more of? And a few clients who've done that, and it has been interesting to learn, you know, how they find you, and so on.
I'll say this, Sally, we'll put it in the resources, but we're working on bi-weekly national polls with Chronicle of Philanthropy on individuals. And there is an exact question in there about what are the messages you want to hear from nonprofits right now. So we'll make those findings part of the, and we think that's going to change over time. So we'll make those available to you guys so you can see them if you missed it in the Chronicle of Philanthropy. We do have one other question. I don't know if you see it, Janine, in the chat, not the Q&A.
Right. So that question, Sally, is, do you think merchandising and virtual events promote first-time donors? We're very interested in reaching first-time donors at this time. Also, can some people share how they have success in converting social media users to donors?
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that question. What I am seeing that is promoting first-time donors is stories in the media. You know, like there's been, you know, here's our food box program, you know, we're now doing deliveries, and your local station has covered that story, and then people start sending in donations. Clubs, you know, like a neighborhood association has promoted some nonprofit that is in their neighborhood. Sometimes people just find you and they're Googling you. I'm seeing some first-time donors, and this is where I've seen it. So I had a client who basically almost 100% government funding, but they had 3,000 email addresses. And we are now starting to ask those folks for money. And so those were first-time donors in that situation because they had underutilized their email database. So that's, you know, it just depends on how you get to them and access them. And okay, are we at time?
We have a few more minutes, so no need to rush the end of your answer.
Okay.
We have about 4 more minutes on the webinar, and then we will stay after if we have some additional questions. So that's an invitation to the group that's with us today. If you have any other questions, you may want to add them either in chat or the Q&A.
Yeah, and I want to, oh, excuse me, Turkey Mouse. I want to finish answering the other questions. Is, can some people share how they successes in converting social media users to donors. And, you know, that's a little bit trickier to track because you don't have like the click through and whatnot. And so I don't have any examples of that, but I'd love to hear what other people to say. But I see there's one more question here.
We actually have two questions.
Okay, go.
One of them is, I'm hesitant to send unsolicited emails to those who haven't officially subscribed. Can we assume if someone gives or engages that it's okay to follow up with an email?
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from all of you too about what is the definition of if it's okay. My understanding is that you can't just send somebody an email if they haven't chosen to be on your mailing list. If they have chosen to be on your mailing list, I think it's okay to send them a solicitation. They have an option to opt out. If they feel that those content are precious and we don't want to make people mad, you also, what is the purpose of your email list and what you hope to get out of it? So think about that. And I totally think that if somebody gives or engages, that it is okay to follow up with email.
Great. So the next question is, during upcoming campaigns, we're considering adding phone calls and sending handwritten letters to all donors, including donors who give $100 or less. Does this seem like too much? We have the capacity because some people's job functions have changed.
Awesome. That's a really great example of how to use staff that don't have as much going on. I believe that every donor has equal value and merit. And unfortunately, because time is an issue, we spend most of our time where we think we're going to raise the most money. Now, what we also know from research is that when people give those first time $25 to $100 gifts, they are testing the water in most cases. In a lot of cases, it doesn't mean that that is their only capacity. And I have a story that I know of someone who gave $50. He was flagged as someone with high capacity through Wealth Engine in the CRM, and he was carefully cultivated, and 2 years later he gave $5 million. So you need to, I believe that every single donor has equal value, and I used to call all of them when I was a development director. So the idea of having contact with every donor warms my heart.
Great. I just actually had seen on Facebook that somebody had put out a fundraising request, and somebody responded and said, I gave you $50 last 2 months ago and I haven't heard anything. And I thought, oops.
Yeah.
Testing the waters, that one didn't go very well.
Right, right. So again, this is a capacity issue, and we know that a lot of organizations don't have a lot of people to help, but the most important thing you can do is say thank you in a meaningful way as soon as possible after somebody gave a gift. That is the best indicator of their likelihood of giving again, is you giving them a thoughtful thank you.
Okay, well, we are at 1 o'clock and we want to be sure to honor the lunch hour. So thank you to Sally. We're really grateful that you spent this time with us, and to all of you who have joined us on this call today. We hope that it was helpful and a good use of your time. We think that it was. Again, we'd like to extend an invitation to you to join us on Friday, where we'll be talking about how to coach yourself and your team through COVID-19. And want to remind you that you'll be hearing from us. We'll send you a survey to get your feedback on how this session was, and we would appreciate if you just take a few moments to give us your impressions and information back. That will help us as we continue to develop the FORTIFY program. With that, I will thank you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and we will stay on for a few more minutes if any of you have any other questions. But for those of you that need to leave us, thank you very much for joining us.
And you can reach out to me too. So feel free to reach out to me if you have a question or something I didn't address. I try to be as general as possible. I know you all have all different kinds of missions. So hang in there. We're going to get through this. Take care of yourselves. And thank you so much for being here with me.
We appreciate it, Sally.
Okay. Are there any folks that have stayed on and have questions?
Questions? We have about 15 people with us still.
Okay. Can we go to showing their faces, or?
I think you have to stop sharing your screen.
Oh, I can do that.
Let me see. We could allow to talk.
Yeah. Anybody there that wants to say hello?
I am.
Oh, I love the boat in Paris that Mark has. That looks like Paris anyway, the same. Okay.
All right, we'll leave it open a few more moments, but if nobody has any questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure.
Hi, this is Francis in San Diego. I was the one that had this two-part question or three-part question, and so I was interested in knowing if any nonprofits are being successful in converting social media users to donors, and if they are being successful, how are they doing that?
Yeah, I'm going to open that up to your colleagues and see if anybody has anything that they want to share. Anyone? Yeah, I know. Yeah.
If they don't have personal experience, if they've heard of any resources that they know of that try to explain a good process for that.
Yeah. So what I have heard, I know you can do Facebook fundraisers, Francis. What I've heard is it's hard to get the money. What I would do is I would include in your posts, I would include a link that goes to your website that goes straight to the donate page, and experiment with that.
Thank you. Yes, we've tried that. We've tried there's been some donations, but they go through Network for Good, and those are anonymous, so we can't keep connection with those folks. but thank you.
Sure.
I'm wondering if there's a way when you do the Network for Good, when you're soliciting that, to let people know that if they want to be connected, to click on a different link to give you that information as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know the social media is, it's really valuable. I think it's a great way to reinforce what you're doing more than anything. So, versus a place to actually raise money. What's so important is that you're driving them to your site. Francis, what is your mission, if you don't mind sharing?
Sure. Our mission is ocean conservation.
Nice. So I want to encourage you to do things like consider hosting a panel of experts and them talking about what's going on, maybe in, what are, oceanographers seeing around the world right now? How does the ocean look different a couple months into COVID? Consider have a Ask the Expert, where people can, live ask questions of somebody. Find some ways to engage with people and then drop in your link and drive them to your site. And you want to support work like this, here's a way you can do that.
Thank you. Yes, we've tried we call it Talk Tuesdays.
Nice.
So we are trying to do to do that, to be in the forefront and mindful.
Yeah, what I have seen work well, like on the panel discussions, is if the panelists are sharing it on their social media and through their networks, and then it drives them to you. I've seen great success with that.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Sally, we do have one other question in the chat that's
Okay.
really a question about resources for video and tech promotion that would fit a smaller agency.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Upaya in Seattle, they did everything on their own phones in-house. And they spent, I don't think they spent any money. You can get inexpensive or free software where you can edit in like text to give and the name of the person who's speaking and stuff like that. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that software. It's like I pick and choose where my area of expertise is, and I haven't spent a lot of time on software. But you can do some Googling and find out about that. What you might want to invest in is an inexpensive tripod so that people can put their phones on it to record, and it's got a remote, the late model phones have really good cameras on them. So that's my recommendation. Does that help, Gretchen?
Actually, can you hear me?
I can now.
Oh, awesome. Great, great. So we have the equipment. It's the expertise that we're lacking is, someone who knows how to use it. So we have phones and the tripod and the camera,
Right.
and it seems like the higher level you get, like, now how do we figure out how to download that to YouTube? And that's a simple thing.
So Gretchen, what I would add is in San Diego, we have an awful lot of media arts nonprofits, including PAC Arts and the Media Arts Center, with people who are not able to work right now. And so I would reach out to them because they have all of this technical expertise, and you may be able to hire them, for a one-time thing or to help you for a certain number of hours. But they do have that ability to do that.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
It is. The other thing is if you have any kind of, utilize your community. So for example, there may be somebody that is close to you that is helping live stream a church service right now. Because there's a lot of organizations that are going virtual. I mean, I picked, my mom is real active at St. Paul's Cathedral in Hillcrest. And so I picked the brain of the person who's live streaming there. And he said, use your phone, Facebook Live. That is a really cheap way to go.
Thank you.
Anything else? You're welcome, Gretchen. Any other questions from anyone? Got a few folks here still, but
Looks like we have all the questions answered. So unless somebody steps up quickly, we'll let you all go and get on with your day.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
there, I put my email address in the chat. If you have something that you think of later and you want to reach out to me, that's fine. And thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.